What's up, guys? This is Kephas.
Well, Blizzard made a pretty big announcement for World of Warcraft this week, one I never thought I would ever see, and it's got the community talking, certainly raised a lot of eyebrows, made some people a little bit upset, and I've had people come and ask my thoughts on what's going on, waiting to hear what I have to say, and I decided to wait a little bit and think it through and just kind of like chew on things and hear what other people have to say before I talk about it and just kind of react to it. And so basically, if you don't know what's going on, in the next patch, Blizzard's going to be releasing a new feature called Rotation Assistant. Basically, this is going to allow players to execute their full rotations with one button. Now, obviously, the trade-off here is that it will incur a longer global cooldown, so it's going to slow down your actions and kind of cap your DPS if you use it, so you won't be doing as much DPS as someone would who is executing their rotation appropriately without it. So there is a trade-off, and they are marketing this as an accessibility tool. Ian made that very clear. This is something that obviously concerns me a lot. If you don't know, I've been making YouTube videos for a very long time for World of Warcraft, and one of the things that I've been doing is making videos about an add-on for the game called Gnome Sequencer Enhance, or GSE. And what that add-on does is it allows you to create advanced macros that will consolidate your rotation into fewer buttons. Ideally one if your class allows it. And so I've been doing that for a long time because I am a disabled player. I have 20 over 400 vision in one eye and I'm completely blind in the other eye, and it's simply impossible for me to track everything in the game, track all the cooldowns that your class might have. With you have procs, buffs and debuffs and combo points, and then of course you have fight mechanics. It's just too much. And so I've always relied on one button macros or whatever to help me play the game. I've been doing it for a very long time. I've been blind my whole life, and I've been playing World of Warcraft since the Burning Crusade. And so this is something that obviously concerns me a lot, and I never thought I would see the day that Blizzard added this type of a feature to the game. And so I think that it has brought a lot of conversations, a lot of talking points, a lot of different perspectives. And I don't think this is like a simple conversation to have. I think, there's a lot to this, but I'm not here to drop some kind of a hot take or, have some ridiculous opinion. I have lived experience. Like I said, I've been playing the game for a very long time. And so I'm going to try my best. To be honest, my thoughts are going in many different directions, and I'm going to try to cover as much ground as I can and tell you guys what I really think. I've always tried to be honest and open about my thoughts anytime I talk about anything, anytime I share anything. When I make macros, I'm always transparent about how they're going to work and all that kind of stuff. And I've always tried to be upfront and honest with people, and that's what I want to do here. So the first thing I do want to talk about is I want to highlight the accessibility side of this. Like I said, I've been using GSE for a very long time, and something I think that is very important is that this is designed to be an accessibility tool. And I think that there are a lot of people that are just walking right past that fact, walking right past the idea of accessibility. And I think there are a lot of people that aren't being seen in this conversation. And I feel like that when I listen to a lot of other people talk about this, it's like that fact is being completely ignored for whatever reason. Maybe it's because it doesn't help their case. Maybe there's a certain number of people who just don't want to say that we don't think that people who have disabilities should be able to play this game. If you can't play it, then you shouldn't be able to play it at all. And I've had people say that to me many times over the years. So I know there are people out there that think that way. It's just an ugly thing that people don't want to reveal. I don't think that's the case for a lot of people. And there have been many people that have just been upfront and said, this is an accessibility tool. Shout out to the Comeback Kids. They made a very similar comparison to me, exact same comparison, is that basically this is bumper bowling. Like this is a bowling alley with bumpers, right? And so you have kids that use that, and they're not trying to win some bowling tournament. They're not trying to become professional bowlers. They're just out here having fun. And so people that use bumper bowling, no big deal. And there are a lot of people that are, it's like you're a professional bowler running into a bowling alley freaking out at people for using bumpers, right? That's honestly what it looks like to me. That's my perspective when I hear people flipping out over this stuff, in terms of like it existing at all, right? And so that's one perspective that I have. And like I said, I'm not trying to diminish what people are saying. I'm not saying that everybody who's not talking about accessibility is that type of person, but there is that side of it. And I do think that there needs to be a certain side of this conversation where people who have disabilities have a voice, and I hope that I can play a part in representing that voice well enough. But yeah, this is definitely an accessibility tool, and it's absolutely necessary for where the game is. And I also kind of want to stress that this isn't something that's entirely new. Like I said, GSE has been around for many years. I've been using it since Warlords of Draenor, and that's over 10 years ago. Okay, even before that, I remember back in the Burning Crusade using cast random macros, mapping them to my mouse wheel on my hunter, and basically doing my full rotation with that. And that was natively supported in the game with macros. I remember in Wrath of the Lich King being, I say this with a degree of humility, but I was top DPS on my raiding team, clearing ICC as a rep paladin using a one button cast random macro that basically executed my whole rotation. That's been around for a long time. It's nothing new. That was back in 2008, 2009. It's 2025. This kind of thing has always been around. It's always been in the game, and there have been people that have been using it for as long as WoW's been around. I remember, Swifty used to make those one-shot macros. Not exactly the same, but basically similar. So this is not entirely new to World of Warcraft. It's not new to MMOs. Even Final Fantasy 14, it's frowned upon for sure, but you can make macros in that game where you can stack abilities on top of each other. They're not efficient, but you can do it. And certainly people who have accessibility needs, or maybe people who are just frankly lazy and aren't really interested in min-maxing or performing really well, they're just casually playing the game. People use stuff like that. So this isn't like a whole new thing. It's not like some, oh my gosh, what are they thinking? This has always been around. And so it is kind of a surprise that there are people that are like, oh, what is going on? This is going to ruin the game. If it's going to ruin the game, well, then the game's been ruined for a very long time. This new tool, obviously it's Blizzard trying to maybe have a little bit more control over add-ons, and what they can do, because it's not just the GSE thing. They're also adding in a feature that resembles Heliki a lot. Obviously they're doing the cooldown tracker, tackling weak ores, really combat add-ons in general. They don't want to get rid of add-ons. They don't want you to not be able to customize your UI, but they definitely want to take the reins on combat add-ons. And I'm going to be honest with you guys, I think that's a good idea. I really do. I think that it's good that they're doing that. I think that the game has become very dependent, or I should say the player base has become very dependent on these third-party tools to play the game. I think it is it's a symptom of a bigger issue that we'll talk about. But overall, I think it's good that they're adding this stuff into the game natively. I would say that the rotation assistant and GSE as well, as someone who's been using it, I've always viewed it as a necessary evil. It's not going to solve every problem, and it's certainly not the most ideal solution when it comes to people wanting to engage with the game. But when you're talking about survival and that it's allowing people to play where they otherwise might not be able to, especially with the game that's becoming increasingly more complicated, I think this is a great idea. I'm glad that there is a challenge in the game, and that there is a place for hardcore sweaty min-maxers to go optimize the game as much as they want to. But when I listen to them talk about World of Warcraft, it makes the game sound so unappealing that I want to throw myself into the nearest ditch. When I hear people talking about number crunching and optimization, theory crafting, and simulations, and all this god awful stuff that to me just completely zaps the game of its magic in every way. It's fine that that's how people want to play, but that doesn't sound very appealing to me. So I think that's very important when people say, why would anybody want to use this? Why would you even play the game if you're using this? Well, it's just a different type of automation. It's just a different type of simulation. It's simulating the combat. You've been simulating the theory crafting, right? So what's the difference? You're simulating the game. You're not learning the game yourself. You're using tools to do it for you. And then other people are using you to learn how to play the game, and everybody's just copy pasting what everybody else does. That does not sound fun to me. I don't want to play the game like that. And I think that approach to game design is partially why the game is becoming so difficult in the first place, and why so many people are needing tools to even play the game to begin with. And I'm speaking more of casual players and people who have accessibility needs like myself. You know, when WoW first came out, it was like, as a hunter, arcane shot, you use that on cooldown and in between auto shots, and then throw up serpent sting. And that was kind of it. Maybe multi-shot if you have the mana for it, you know? That was it. Wasn't that hard. But as time has gone on, it's become so much more than that. You know, like when you take a fire mage and it's like, okay, here's the core rotation. Fireball till you get a crit, fire blast when you have a crit, and then pyroblast. It's like, that's not so bad. But then when you're like, okay, but you know, you also have to think about these other procs and you have all these other things to worry about. You add Phoenix Flames into the rotation. Oh, and then you want to pre-cast Pyroblast 3 seconds before the pull and then pop a potion in the middle of that cast. Also, right when you cast it, make sure that you pop fire. I don't even know what I'm talking about. This is what it sounds like. It's like, you know, your openers, right? And then you need to have a PhD on how to play an arcane mage. I don't think that's fun. And I don't think that it's not just about accessibility at that point. That just doesn't sound fun. And I don't think I'm the only one that feels that way. I think there are a lot of people. I think that the majority of people who play World of Warcraft don't play it like that. And I think that's very important for people to remember. You know, people say, oh, this is not going to help you play the game better. I don't care. I'm not interested in clearing Mythic 20s. I'm not out here trying to become the next world first guild. Right? Like, I'm just playing World of Warcraft. I'm just trying to explore a big world with all these zones and a story and fun and just have a good time. And I honestly think that, like, really, like, people say this isn't going to be very good. To what degree? Like, from what perspective? This is going to make you suck at the game. I think depending on how well it does, I mean, if you're looking at, like, you know, depending on how well it executes your rotation, even with incurring a penalty to actions per minute or whatever, I think you're still going to be able to clear a decent amount of content. You know, you may not be able to clear like high level mythics or mythic raids or whatever, but you'll probably be able to do decent content with this if you want to. And that's cool. I'm great with that. You know, I probably could clear tier 11 delves using the rotation assistant. You know, and some people may not like that. That's fine, whatever, but I don't see a problem with it. You know, I would prefer to not have to use it at all, but that's not the game that I'm playing. I'm not playing a game where I'm able to not use it. I have to use it. Right. And that's just kind of the way it is. And that's from an accessibility tool. It's also from a tool of, you know, somebody who has a lot of work they have to do. They have very little time to invest in, you know, going to college to become a WoW player that is often required. It feels like, you know, you have to have, like I said, PhD and your arcane mage opener. You have to know every fight before you ever enter a dungeon. You know, you have to know your rotation before you ever even queue up for anything. And the leveling doesn't teach that to you. You know, so I mean, there is a side of this where the game and the environment is very unfriendly to people trying to learn the game. You know, and people talk about it all the time. I even heard, like, you know, I heard like in the video with Ian, like the guys were talking about like how I think the Mythic Raiders would like to go back to a time where we collaborated together and we didn't use these tools. And it's like, yeah, I hear you, and that's awesome. You know, it's nice to think that way, but then why do people get kicked from dungeons after one wipe? Why do people rage quit dungeons after one wipe if that's true? People aren't trying to collaborate. People don't want to invest the time. Maybe they don't have the time to invest to collaborate and figure things out, figure out what's wrong. What did you do wrong? Go run Dawnbreaker with a group of strangers and see how things go. It may not be so bad now, but at the beginning of the expansion, it was a nightmare. Very few times was I clearing that dungeon because of how many people that were rage quitting. Go play classic Kata and run dungeons with randos and find out what it's like. It's not fun, you know, because you have a community that doesn't have the willingness to collaborate. They're just trying to figure out how to play so they don't get kicked from a dungeon, right? That's the perspective that you need to try to have. Like, you're not thinking from the perspective of the average player. You're thinking from your perspective, and that's the problem. Just like people aren't thinking from the accessibility perspective. People say, you know, oh, this is for people who are too stupid to be able to execute a rotation. Listen, I've been making guides for GSE for years to help people play the game because they can't. And along with those guides, I've been making beginner's guides as well for people who don't want to use GSE. Because when you start playing this game, especially these days, it's a little bit tricky to figure out how to play the game. And when you go and look up a guide and it's going through all this like number crunching, meta chasing, min maxing openers and all these other things, and just like these 20-page write-ups and how to play a fire mage, people are just like, no thanks. And so I make these really short 2 to 3 to 5 minute guides going over the very basics, and people are like, oh my God, thank you so much. I needed this elementary school introduction to how to play this game. And they don't want to spend 30 minutes theory crafting to do it. That's the reality. And that, I think that's where a lot of players sit. And I think that voice needs to be listened to a little bit more. I'm not saying that the game needs to become over casualized, right? I remember a time when Blizzard pruned every class to the point where people were upset because it felt like it had been it went too far. You know, so it's not necessarily that things need to be dumbed down, as people like to say, but I do think that there is a problem. I think maybe, and maybe I'm wrong about this. Maybe it's with the dev team, maybe it's with the players, maybe it's both. I think a lot of people make this mistake of comparing and equating complexity with depth. I think WoW has become a game that's very complex, and I think that complexity, people say that adds depth to the game. I don't think it adds very much depth to the game. I think it just makes the game feel more cumbersome. And the best example I can give, and I'm not saying that WoW should become Elden Ring, but like Elden Ring is a hard game. But the thing is that like the gameplay loop, the core mechanics are easy to understand and easy to execute. The game is easy to pick up and play, right? That's not the case for WoW. WoW isn't a game that's easy to pick up and play, and so it alienates new players and casual players and returning players because of that. And I think that's a big part of the problem, and I think that is like all this stuff, rotation assistance and cooldown trackers and all these things that we're talking about, those are symptoms to a larger problem of a game that's become more complex, and it's created this arms race between the community and the developers to address those issues and to solve those problems, right? People are always going to find ways to make things simpler and easier and less convenient, especially in a game where you're doing a lot of repetitive, weekly, daily content. You're trying to make it so it's not as cumbersome. By making it easier over time, it feels more rewarding, right? So I think that's part of the problem. I think WoW's become not so much deeper, but more complex. And I think that that's a big reason why we're having these systems. I would prefer not to have to use it. I would rather engage with the game. I would rather play the game and do the rotation and be able to. But the thing is, the reality of the situation is that I can't track 12 cooldowns. I can't track 20 procs, and also 15 different mechanics that every boss fight has and 12 swirlies on the ground. It's like playing Mozart with a piano that's been set on fire in a building that's collapsing around you. It's chaos. And it's very difficult to get into. And so I think that, you know, there is a side of this where in trying to design a game for a very high level player who theory crafts and simulates and uses like 20 weak auras, you have a game that's overly complicated, you know, and so how do you fix that? Well, I think that, you know, maybe things like a rotation assistant, for a lot of people, it's a band-aid fix and it's a good temporary fix. And it may be something that's necessary forever. You know, having that kind of accessibility tool is in the game, and it's necessary for people who just can't but like playing the game. I mean, look, I think it's intellectually dishonest to say that like this is the only reason to play WoW, combat, you know, doing mythic dungeons. I think that's just not true. You know, we're going to be getting player housing in the next expansion. You're looking at this massive open world with all these zones and all these places to explore, dungeons to dive into, other players around to get to know and play with and achieve, you know, little goals and do quests and find gear and all that stuff. There's a lot to that doesn't necessarily require sweaty min-maxing optimization, you know? And so I think that's important to remember as well. It's not all about getting to the highest level of difficulty and clearing that. That's not why I would say that's a very small portion of the player base wants to do that. And it's good that it's there. But I think we need to start thinking about providing a space for everybody else too. I think Delves was a good start for that. And I think that there's more that they can do. And I think that having fun events like Mop Remix and different things is great. And I think adding a rotation assistant for people who are not physically able to execute their rotations does that as well. So is this good for the game? Well, from an accessibility perspective, yes, absolutely. From an engagement perspective, it's a little bit more complicated. It certainly isn't going to get you to engage with the game's combat mechanics more, and that's certainly not a good thing. But for people who can't engage with those mechanics, this will allow them access to other parts of the game, and I think that is a good thing. I've offered my perspective. I've tried to represent it the best I can and try to be respectful of other perspectives while, maybe pushing back against, this unwillingness to engage with a part of this conversation that I feel like should be engaged with a little bit more. And so this feature, it may not be the perfect fix for the game. It may not fix the game in many areas, but I definitely think that this highlights an area where this game is hurting. And that is with the casual player who finds WoW to be becoming way too complex and way too cumbersome. And I think that's something that needs to be looked at further. And what is the solution for that? Again, I don't know. I don't have the answer, but it's something that we need to start coming to terms with. So that's, I think, where the game is at. But I would love to hear what your thoughts are on this situation. Are you going to be using this thing? Try to be respectful. Do not say anything disparaging to people who would use this or against people who are disabled. I will flat out ban you. I have no room here in my space for a-holes. So I'm just going to be real with you there. But I would like to hear people's perspective on this. Feel free to let me know in the comments. But with all that being said, I will see you guys on the next one.
Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, let me know by clicking that like button. And feel free to share it with your friends so they can enjoy it as well. And if you'd like to see more videos, you can subscribe to the channel and click on the bell icon to be notified as soon as new videos are posted. You can also follow me on Facebook, and if you like, you can support my work on Patreon. Links to all that stuff can be found in the description below. This is Kephas. Until next time.